Hey folks, welcome to the shop. And yes, another mod video. I'm sure at this point you've seen tons of videos regarding my mods going on. And as you can imagine, they're all happening at the same time. So there's a bit of a test and trial and error and all sorts of stuff like that. But today we're going to be focusing on this beautiful piece of billet aluminum. This is Quad Shop Customs QSC Rev X primary clutch. So to turn these big bad boys confidently, we're going to be switching up the primary to this guy. This is probably the best upgrade in my opinion you can do for the Outlanders. I can't speak for Renegades, but I'm sure it's somewhere along the lines of the same thing. You've got a ton of power not being used, and the Can-Am clutches, well, maybe not the secondary, but definitely the primary is unsatisfactory at best. So this is what we're going to be switching to, and we're going to turn this thing into a whole other monster. So super pumped about this. QSC, at the request of Trevor from Dirty Life, made sure this thing was tuned and weighted for my scenario with these tires, the RJWC exhaust and everything like that. So it should be good to go right out of the box. I had a look over and my God, this thing is just gorgeous. And the first thing I noticed when I pulled it out of the box was that it is significantly lighter than, like, it's stupid light than anything I've ever seen clutch wise. Actually, I did do a set of STM clutches for a friend of mine, and very similar setup. I'm not going to get into the specifics of why this one and not another one, why not STM, why not QSC. This is what I settled on after my research, and we're going to start tearing down and getting this thing on there. So this is probably the most exciting mod for me, just because I know how much potential these bikes have, and they're just sitting there being unused. So this will be it for me. Super pumped about this. And they even give you a spring engagement adjustment if you want the RPM to be raised on engagement. And they give you a whole set of different weights and stuff like that, so you can get into tuning this yourself. I don't recommend getting into this unless you know what you're doing, because clutches are kind of a fine art that you need to play with a lot in order to understand. I'm not going to be one of those videos explaining how clutches work and what they are exactly. There's plenty of videos out there for that. But for today, we're going to be waking up a ton of potential power for our machine. And one of the final touches to get this thing to where I really wanted it. So let's get on with that and start tearing apart the clutch housing and basically take off the belt, take off the primary, and away you go. Some of the tools you're going to need, and you don't need tools exactly, but to make the job a little easier, is this guy here to hold your primary and secondary to torque properly and remove properly. This is actually going to end up being pretty well useless for me after I switch to the other primary, but I could still use it to hold the secondary while I do some work there. You can do that with a belt, a bar, chunk of wood, that kind of thing. We'll get there when we get there. But we also need the primary removal bolt. So when we pull off the first half, the spider and everything of the primary clutch, this will remove the second half from the shaft off your engine. And this guy, which you also don't need, you can just get a generic metric bolt. But this is to split your secondary to remove the belt off of the clutch system. So that's good. So yeah, just another thing we're going to be doing. Look at all the aluminum. Beautiful, beautiful work by all these companies. I'm a huge fan of RJWC and QSC and what STM's doing and all these other companies. Really light, efficient material that handles heat very well and I'm excited to see how this wakes up the bike. But I think the worst part about it is while I've got all these different projects going on, is I won't actually be able to take this thing for a ride just yet. But we're getting there. We're getting close. And I'll have a big reveal video. I'll take it for a ride and we'll talk about all the mods. But yeah, let's get into it, guys. Pull this thing off. Okay, guys, the obvious first step is to take off all of the clutch bolts that are on there. I think there's like 13 or something like that. Wow. It's my wife. Yes, wife.
Hey, buddy.
How are you?
Good, you?
Oh, you're on video.
Oh, right now.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll make it a blooper or something.
Okay. You want me to pick up supper before you leave?
That would be ideal because I haven't thought about eating.
Okay. Steak night?
A what night?
Steak night.
Steak night. Oh, from yeah. Okay, guys. So what we're gonna do now is the obvious part. Pull off the words. Oh my god, how many bloopers am I gonna have in this video? Okay, guys. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull off the clutch cover, and it's a series of either Torx or 8mm sockets. You just pull all these off. There's like 13 or 15 of them or something like that, and the cover comes off. In the Outlander Max Edition or long frame XMR 1000, you can get this off with the footwell, no problem. One thing I do suggest when you're taking these off is take them off by hand. On the other side, these actually bolt into very thin aluminum sheaves that are actually part of the cover, and they're easily torn out or cross-threaded or things like that. So I'm always telling people, just have a little bit of patience. Don't put an impact to these things. Even taking them off, don't use an impact. You can torque them so bad that you'll pull out those sheaths on the other side and you'll never get them on again. And they're super important because they squeeze the seal that keeps this thing watertight. So I can pretty much get away with this scenario here. Just a small 1/4-inch ratchet. Long extension. I prefer the wobble type extensions just so you can get a little bit of angle for some of the bottom bolts that are at a weird angle. The only one I usually switch tools at is one of the bottom bolts. You can actually go through the bottom and get it with like a ratcheting wrench. It's what I prefer. You can do it with a regular wrench. It would just take longer, that kind of thing. But super simple. We'll take that off and we're good to go that way. So there we have it, folks. Covers off. You can see this is the primary and secondary. This is what comes on your machine. Some of you might be confused because your ends change. They somewhere around 17, 18, and not all models, but they're all changed to this type of bolt here now with a set screw and your actual bolt. And this side's a double bolt scenario. You might see something else on your machine. That's because some models did have a different kind of bolt system for this. This is what you'll see from now on the Can-Am machines until, I don't know, 2020 when they change stuff. But so this is the stock setup, and my belt surprisingly looks good. Now, this belt that I'm using here is actually the Maverick belt. It's a little bit stronger. I've heard good things about it, and so far it is holding up really well. Because my stock belt that came with the Outlander was absolute garbage. I ran through that pretty quick. So just going to have a good look at this, and then we're going to start by backing off the set screw, undoing this bolt, and letting this first half, the spider and carrier, fly off. And then we'll be left with the back portion here that's actually attached. It's more of a press fit to your actual crank on your engine. So the secondary will be staying as is, but so far so good. I can tell that I've heated these clutches up pretty good, and that doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's going to happen to anybody who rides these like they should. But yeah, so far so good, super easy. I've been in here a handful of times just to make sure my clutches were clean. It's one thing everybody forgets in maintenance is just clean your clutches, check your belt. Every good big day ride, I'll check my belt. If not, every once in a while for sure. But yeah, I've seen some clutches in some rough shape, and so far so good on these. Yeah, let's get to work. Okay, folks, for this next portion, we're gonna need a few tools. It's a 6 mil Allen for the set screw, 21 mil socket for the actual primary nut. You're gonna need either a bolt or the actual splitter for the secondary to get the bolt off. You're either gonna need the actual primary secondary holder tool or put a belt over the primary or whatever you gotta do to hold them. And we're gonna start by actually installing that. So basically how that works is we're gonna take the belt off first. One of the holes on the secondary is actually threaded. You basically push that in. And that's it for the belt. Now be careful because these belts actually have a rotation. That's something you're gonna have to keep in mind when you put this back on. You want the rotation in the right way. The way the rotation works on these belts is towards the front of the ATV, so that's good. Belt looks to be in decent shape, got a little bit of glazing, but plenty of life in it, so that's good. Now, as far as the next portion, we're going to take out our bolts from the secondary. Then we're going to put our carrier on. Screw that in. Then just back off your set screw. Okay guys, so this set screw, something to be careful of is a lot of set screws can be righty-loosey. This one is in fact very normal, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. I had to apply a bit of heat to it. I found out that Can-Am uses a little bit of Loctite on this, which isn't really necessary, but I'm sure from the factory they just want to ensure that everything is good to go and you're not going to have a primary in the leg. So I just applied a little bit of propane heat to the outside, and then I used a squirt bottle and spray some water on the actual nut to shrink it and keep this hot, and it came off no problem, like not a problem at all. So you just want to back it off, don't actually remove it, and then you can put your socket over top, 21 mil I believe, yep, and start loosening that. Once you have it relatively loose, you can pull off your holder or however you're holding this with, and you just want to keep a hand on this thing because it is spring loaded. So we're going to do that next, and once we have that nut off, pull the bolt out and then hold on to everything as we remove that clutch. So the first half will come off with the spider and the carrier, and then the back sheath we'll do separately with another tool. So So there's your spider and carrier. This is the spring that's keeping it all spring loaded. This next part, that's what holds your spring. And then the part after that is your sprag clutch, or your one-way engine brake. It's just a sprag clutch for all you mechanically inclined folks. It only goes one way. That's coming off next. What you need to consider about that is there's lots of little ball bearings and springs and stuff in this, so just be very careful about losing parts. And I lost all the parts. Perfect. So to get this next part off, once you have the carrier and spider, everything off, I put the nut back onto the bolt, and then I tightened down the set screw to make it one piece again. And then I took an impact and I literally just took out this bolt. So now that this is out, put that with your clutch. And then find the tool that you put somewhere that, oh my God. I am so prepared and professional, it's ridiculous. I literally had it here. Got it. So there it is. This is the primary puller tool, the other side of the sheath. This is literally made for this purpose. I don't know if it's also 21 mil. No, of course it isn't. I'm going to assume it's 19. And it's 19. So this part here, just screw it in by hand as far as you can. And then take the impact to it and it'll pull it right off. Hopefully. Some of these can get pretty seized. You'll see like water tricks to put in there and stuff like that to build up some pressure and try to take it off. See if this works out for us. Might have to pull out the air. Okay. Brought out the big boys. Be careful doing this, but hopefully, just like that. That was easy with a little bit of air. Now I know everyone doesn't have air in their shop, but it makes things a hell of a lot easier. Don't go applying heat to everything. You're gonna have a bit of a mess. There's a lot of plastic and things like that going on, so just be careful that way. So while I was in here, I took a minute just to clean everything up. I obviously had a couple splatters or something come into one of my intakes, so I cleaned all that up. I checked the seal at the back of the case. There's nothing crazy going on there. And I just wiped down the outer bolt side of the casing. Just to make sure while you're in here, I mean, you might as well. This is, in my opinion, some of the maintenance items you should be considering. So everything's clean that way. And now we're gonna get the primary on, the QSC Rev X onto the unit. Some people like to say that when you first put it on, you wanna mate them. It's basically a process of making sure that they're happy being together. So this outer crank from your engine, you wanna just run the clutch back and forth on it with a tiny, tiny film of oil and then clean everything up and put them on. So I'm not gonna bore you with that process, but putting on this clutch is actually much simpler of a unit than the Can-Am clutches. It's a one-piece unit, goes on together, it's all good that way. And the bolt, you just put a little bit of blue Loctite which I highly recommend because I don't know if you've ever seen a primary or a secondary blow off into your leg. I don't recommend Googling it, just take my word for it. And then we'll run it, torque it again, run it, torque it again. That's basically what's going to go on from here, and the rest is really, really simple. Just put your case back on, be very careful about it, and that's it. So let's carry on. One thing I definitely highly recommend, blue Loctite, and don't be shy with it. Not like an exuberant amount, but like, you know, a reasonable amount. It's 10 mil Allen on these QSC revs, which is surprising for an American company to use science to actually measure things. But now it's starting to move, so I'm probably going to find a bar and wrap it in something just to protect the billet, and then get the torque wrench out and do 75 foot-pounds. "75 foot-pounds. It'd be a shame if I dinged up the aluminum in any way, but looks like it's good to go. So now we all got to just split the secondary again and put the belt back on in the correct rotation direction, and give it a test run and get ready to torque it again afterwards. Don't be shy to check the torque on this a million times, because believe me, these things can cause some serious damage. Check the rotation. See if we have one of these explode. I'm going to keep the camera on this side and I'll be on the other side just because I know the damage these things can do.
It's really important on this part that you use a little bit of anti-seize and you don't over torque these things. Once they're seated, just snug it up ever so gently and that'll be fine. What I like to do is, because I have to fight it in there a little bit because I didn't take out the wheel well, I look with a flashlight and make sure all the holes are actually lined up, and then I only put them in part way, and then I do corner to corner, and then once I make sure everything's seated, I'll snug it down. But don't go too hard on these because you will pull the other side, the threaded part that's pressed into the plastic on the backside. You'll ruin those threads so easily, so don't think tighter is better. And if you manage to get it too tight, you can actually warp the gasket and let water in. So this is one of those very delicate scenarios that you want to just take your time at. So there you have it, folks. Clutch is on. I retorqued it about 6 times, but everything's good. I tested it out. It fits in the case. I know some STM clutches have issues where they actually hit the outside of the case and you have to like melt the inside in order to make it fit, but the QSC fits like a glove. I can't wait to try it out, but obviously I've got other things going on. But we're one step closer. I'm going to slap some plastics on it because that should be the last time I dig into it during this modification session anyway. But no, that's great. So I can't wait to finish this up. I'm really happy with the installation. It's a much easier clutch to work on, tune, maintain, that kind of thing. I'm really glad to be getting rid of the stock clutch. And I'm even more glad that I can finally clean this place up. So yeah, just another step closer to making another mean machine. So right on, guys. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, just comment down below. I'll answer all of them. Yeah, and if you want to get a hold of one of these things yourself, just talk to Trevor at dirtylife.ca and he'll sort you out. Well, folks, that's the job. The clutch cover's all on and everything's tightened down, good to go. Gave it a quick hose for a water test. It's not a perfect science, but it helps me a little bit before I jump into some water or something. I don't expect to find too much in the winter, but she's all buttoned up. I'm just waiting on an item or two because the mods aren't over yet. There's still a list together, but it's the first time it's been in one piece for a while. That might be a hint for you guys. But yeah, I'm glad this is done. Gonna have a little celebratory beverage and call it a day. So we'll see you next time.